go to Calgary. Dennis McConaghy is my guest. He's a former energy executive who worked on the development of the original Keystone pipeline. Thanks for taking the time for us today.
Good to be with you.
All right, the significance for you. What do you make of what we're seeing, what we're hearing today?
Well, I'm actually somewhat more underwhelmed than some of the initial reaction. And I think I would point people to 2 points here. The condition that the Pathway project has to be basically commercially fixed by April was really, I think, indicative of how difficult it will be to find a way to actually get the three parties, the private sector, Ottawa, and Alberta, to find a way not just to cover the capital costs, but who is going to pay for the ongoing operating costs of this system, which simply, is an exercise in sequestering related emissions from the McMurray upgraders. But the question is, who pays for it? Is there any economic value in this, or is it just something that puts Canada at a competitive disadvantage? And I think that's really going to be very hard bargaining. And predictably, when many of us said, what are the devil is in the details, this key detail has been punted to April. And it's really pivotal to the whole architecture of the thing and the whole rationalization on the part of Mark Carney. So I point that out. Secondly, the expectation that Alberta is going to agree to increase the carbon tax, because that's actually what it is, on industrial emissions as another condition of the tanker ban being removed, the changes to the expectation that Alberta would decarbonize its Alberta electrical generation system. That Alberta signing on to those increased industrial prices clearly is going to depend on whether the volumes that would have to pay it that are being exported would be exempted from paying the tax, because if they were to pay it, they again would be at a competitive disadvantage actually being able to export the oil. So these two elements, I think, are going to be very difficult to get to an actual agreement on over the next 4 months, but they're fundamental to this architecture. And I just want to point out that until that really comes together as a way of who takes on these costs, and is there an exemption for exported barrels of paying the industrial carbon tax, then the rest of this really doesn't happen, because without those, I'm sure Mark Carney would feel there's not enough to keep his carbon bona fides in place. And from an Alberta point of view, they don't actually advance anything. So I think this is really going to be a case of the next 4 months being where the toughest bargaining to get this thing actually in flight will occur. And I say that notwithstanding that there will still be, efforts to bring BC to a more accommodating position. But I just think that it's important to understand that those two pieces are still hanging out there before one can really say this is a done deal.
Let me give you a scenario. Let's say that some sort of workaround is, figured out by April or at some point, and this pipeline does happen. What would it mean for the energy patch in Alberta? What would it mean for Canada as a so-called energy superpower, frankly?
Well, I mean, it's obviously enormously beneficial that Canada adds an extra 1 million barrels of production and exports it to the highest netback markets, and that well could be in Asia. And anyone can just look at the existing export contribution of exported oil and natural gas to the Canadian trade balance. So it's enormously lucrative to Canada to actually make this incremental production happen and it being exported. The question is the Carney government ultimately going to be prepared to make further concessions on climate policy to actually make it happen? And I think the next 4 months is going to be the real determinative period, despite the euphoria that is coming out of Calgary this morning.
Yeah. Can I also tap into your expertise as all the years you had as an executive in the oil industry? I mean, when we're talking about either one company or a consortium coming forward and agreeing to actually build this pipeline, your thoughts on who that may or may not actually be, and whether there are conversations happening behind the scenes about companies that are interested and willing to move forward under the right circumstances?
Well, interestingly, the same companies that are part of Pathways are the major oil sands producers. Those are the fundamental determinants as to whether any of this happens or not. If they are satisfied that the risks are low enough to justify the programs that they would have to engage on to actually generate this incremental 1 million barrels, they would, in the normal course, engage in other companies that have expertise in pipeline construction, companies like South Bow, Enbridge, et cetera, and they would do the actual construction process and all the other regulatory related components. But the key elements of deciding whether this is going to happen or not is going to really be in the hands of that 4 or 5 major oil sands production companies, because it's their investment in the production that actually validates this pipeline. But certainly Canada has the capacity in terms of expertise to build it and to finance it, if in fact these conditions can be, I think, adjusted so that the risk of taking on that commitment, the $16 billion plus to build the pipeline, has been reduced enough. And again, I come back to the next 4 months is going to really tell us that. But Canada has the capacity to do this if the risks related to the project are sufficiently reduced.
Dennis, great to have you part of our coverage today as we follow this breaking news. Thanks for taking the time for CTV today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.